Camouflage was an omnipresent tactic throughout World War II. This practice, common throughout the 20th century, does not appear to have extended to military uniforms during the conflict, at least in Europe. Americans in the Pacific used camouflage long before fighting in Europe, and some German divisions also utilized it. So why did the Americans ban camouflage in Europe? Why didn't the Germans and Soviets usually use it either? In this video, we will talk about the curious case of camouflage in the largest military conflict in history. So make yourself comfortable and welcome to Guns Club. On December 7th, 1941, World War II would begin for the United States. There was still a long way to go before they could even fight in Europe, in the heart of the Reich. But that didn't mean they didn't need to wear military uniforms on the front lines. In the Pacific Theater, camouflage uniforms were common, P-42, which in general performed well in every attack on the Japanese islands. At that time, likewise, single-color uniforms were used and were the most common. This camouflage was called olive drab 3 and olive drab 7 in the middle and late stages of the conflict. Yes, I called them camouflage because they are camouflages, at least according to United States Army standards. It's just that the P-42 has patterns and the olive drab doesn't. In the Pacific, the Americans understood that patterned camouflage was much more effective than single color. So during the preparations for the Normandy landing, the use of patterned camouflage in Europe was studied. The plan was to use it in a limited capacity to assess its combat effectiveness. If favorable, they would standardize it army-wide. By the time the landing began, many members of the 2nd Armored Division could be seen wearing uniforms with camouflage patterns. Also from the 2nd and the 30th Infantry Division, the uniforms were quite ingenious. You could see full camouflage pattern setups with the pants and jacket as a single piece, as well as two-piece versions with pants and jacket separate. The uniform was reversible with a sand camouflage both inside and out. For jungle, it was designed to use the beach camouflage during the landing and then the jungle camouflage inside Europe. Of course, the helmets had the uniform pattern with a reversible cover. In the same way as expected, a lot of interesting data was obtained. During the landing, many soldiers abandoned their full uniforms because they caused a lot of heat, so they were quickly discarded. The reversible versions were also quickly discarded, since from 44 onwards fighting would only take place within Europe and not on any beach or desert. The camouflage seemed to be very good. The soldiers who used it loved the high level of concealment it provided. However, the patterned camouflage would quickly be banned for reasons beyond its effectiveness. Years earlier, in 1935, Germany had promoted the use of camouflage for all components of its armed forces. In fact, they had a division of scientists specifically dedicated to camouflage research. This division was led by Otto Schick, an art professor from Munich. Schick also thought about double camouflage, about reversible shirts. But to take into account the European seasons, in summer the environment reflects light in a different spectrum than in autumn. So it doesn't make sense to use the same camouflage in these two seasons. So their camouflage had green patterns for summer and brown ones for autumn. This new camouflage was tested by the SS disposition troops, and it was so good that they estimated it would reduce the casualty rate by 15%. Schick also developed a special camouflage mask for snipers and a special waterproof cotton tarp for all the camouflage patterns. These camouflage designs were so well liked by the SS High Command that they became official and distinctive for all SS divisions. In 1941, these camouflage patterns were slightly modified and used by other German armed forces branches, including the Luftwaffe and Kriegsmarine. Camouflage was planned for use by the entire Wehrmacht, including the Fallschirmjäger. However, the company that produced them could barely deliver 10,000 pieces per month. The production was somewhat artisanal, and although it was gradually being modernized, it couldn't keep up to produce millions of uniforms per month. Production increased from 10,000 uniforms per month to 33,000 by 1944. When the Allies landed in France, some divisions of the Wehrmacht had uniforms with patterned camouflage. The SS always used camouflage, so the American soldier was very familiar with the enemy's pattern camouflage. In contrast, the American troops had only a couple of divisions with camouflage. So during the fighting, while the Americans were experimenting with camouflage, unusual things happened. Friendly fire. Cases where entire divisions opened fire mercilessly on their allies became very common. From a distance, it was hard to tell they were allies. A popular quote about this comes from a soldier of the 29th Infantry Division, who, along with several of his platoon mates, was the perpetrator of an act of friendly fire. Buddy, those guys should have known better than to wear camouflage like the damn Germans. We shot the hell out of them. The United States Army withholds the data on how many friendly fire casualties there were in this incident. But the problem was so serious that camouflage pattern uniforms were completely banned in August 1944 after just 2 months of use. That's why it's really rare to see photos of American soldiers wearing camouflage in Europe. It's a real historical rarity to see one with camouflage. The Germans would adapt their camouflage much better to urban combat and the seasons, with the Liebemaster, which began production in 1945. But simply, the war ended long before it could become a standard in the army. Camouflage was also uncommon on the Soviet side. This happened because, just like with the Germans, camouflage pieces were used by distinguished troops such as snipers or paratroopers. Snipers, in particular, wore full white camouflage in winter. It wouldn't be until the end of World War II that we would see much more specialized patterns, intended for use in woodland environments. In conclusion, patterned camouflage was so rare in Europe simply because the Allies banned it to avoid friendly fire. The Germans didn't have the capacity to give camouflaged uniforms to all their soldiers, and the Soviets simply weren't very interested in it. If you found this video interesting, you might also want to know why airships were used on D-Day. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Goodbye.